So a lot has been happening in the Indian startup ecosystem, and for that we have the Startup Operators Weekly Roundup, where Roshan and I will be taking you through the biggest headlines from the week that was. So if you're new to the podcast, do consider subscribing to the channel so that you receive regular updates from the Indian startup ecosystem. And last week, Prime Minister Modi also announced a slew of new initiatives aimed towards building the whole digital Bharat. And of course, NPCI, after its blockbuster UPI success, which has been seen globally, it plans on building the next frontier to simplifying foreign remittance in the country. And despite the whole funding winter that has been going on, we have Axilor Investments that raised its new fund, which Roshan and I will be talking about later in this roundup. We'll get started. Roshan, now this has been a really interesting week, but what are some of the things that stood out for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a week of massive headlines, right? We had the unfortunate case of the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe being shot dead at a political campaign rally. And, Shinzo Abe was a great friend of India's, I would say, and a very good friend of Prime Minister Modi also. Mr. Modi also, penned a very heartfelt tribute, calling him his dear friend. A lot of the geopolitical moves that are happening right now, including the Quad, owes its conception to Mr. Abe, who talked about all of this back in 2007. Before that, Japan was very passive about geopolitics, specifically, because they're very strongly allied with the US. But I would say Mr. Abe was one of the first internationalist Japanese prime ministers in that sense. Of course, people remember Abenomics totally revived the Japanese economy, which was seeing degrowth for a while, by stimulating demand and so on, making the exports in the country a little more attractive. Yeah, fantastic person. I was just looking at some of the photos of him meeting the prime minister and at the Ganga Aarti and everything. Very tragic the way he passed away. Thoughts and prayers with the Japanese people and also his family and friends. Well, further south of India, we're also seeing chaos and riots in Colombo, Sri Lanka. The country has been undergoing a national economic crisis of sorts for a while. The inflation is up to, I think, 57%, soon to touch beyond 60, I think. Currency has been massively devalued. They have about $50 billion in debt. The president has declared bankruptcy, and then, you had hordes and hordes of people storming the presidential palace and, the president apparently fleeing the country. While all of this is happening, Akasha Air, which is fronted by Rakesh Jhunjhunwala, finally got their license from the DGCA and they're soon going to start operations. Interestingly, it's coming at a time when, we saw some 7 or 8 incidents of SpiceJet flights, right? Technical issues and wide variety of things happening over the last, month and a half or so. Definitely interesting times, very busy week, I would say. A lot happening on all fronts.
Really busy week. Like, we had a lot of, despite this whole funding winter which is going on, I just think there is so much more happening with the Indian startup ecosystem as a whole, with all the new policy initiatives that the government is announcing, pushing the chip manufacturing industry. Then we have the whole EV push which is going on. There's just so much more, and I'm really excited to talk about it in this roundup.
By the way, we spoke about the account aggregators framework on the last roundup, and interestingly, Setu has just got an account aggregator license as well. So all the best to the Setu and Pine Labs team.
This acquisition of Setu by Pine Labs just plays in so well, because I think Pine Labs is already part of the Open Network ONDC platform and also the Open Credit Enablement Network, or OCEN, right? And the AA license was also one of Setu's primary offering during the sale to Pine Labs, right? So it's very interesting now, they being at the core of the whole India tech stack, how they will be playing this out forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Their API first approach to financial services is revolutionary, I would say, right? They have a great team as well. Nikhil and others are very deeply embedded with everything that's happened in India fintech over the last 5-10 years. So just the kind of team that you would bet on to build some of these products and services.
But talking about Digital India, Prime Minister Modi on Monday inaugurated the Digital India Week 2022 in Gandhinagar and launched a couple of digital initiatives to boost the startups in the country. Some of the initiatives launched included the Digital India Bhashini, Digital India Genesis, and India Stack Global, which are aimed at the enhancing and accessibility of technology and streamlining service delivery as a boost to startups. In addition to it, he also announced the first cohort of 30 institutions that would be supported under the Chips to Startup program, or C2S program. What's interesting is the Bhashini, right? This is a national public digital platform for languages created with the mission to develop services and products for citizens, right? And India being such a diverse country, right? I think that 200 plus local languages spoken, with the entire rural India, tier 2, tier 3 India coming online. I just think the scale here is just so massive that it's actually great to see the government trying to set up the infrastructure for it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a fantastic initiative, I would say, right? See, India has the highest number of English language speakers in the world. I think it's close to about 400 million, if I'm not mistaken. And then if you look at, number of people who speak Hindi and Tamil and so on, it would all be in the range of around 200 to 300 million, right? So that still leaves out so many others, considering that we're a nation of 1.4 billion people. And so something like this is revolutionary in terms of improving access to, the 900 million or so Indians who are going to be online by 2025.
So Bhashini shall act as an orchestrator, unifying the large diverse network across the government, industry bodies, academia, research groups and startups to bring all of their contributions into one single repository. Now, I think this will have a lot of value for those companies coming from abroad but want to build for India.
Yeah. And also Indian startups itself that want to take their products and services to Bharat, right? More than a few startups are working in this whole regional languages and vernacular space, making it easy to, just add an SDK or use an API to sort of translate your offerings into wide variety of languages and so on. But this is again, creating a public library like this, which was accessible by people, is going to make it, a lot more interesting for, everyday startups to sort of add this layer onto their product and service and take it to the hinterlands, I would say. So excellent work.
Also, we've seen the growth stories of companies like Cuckoo FM who are riding on this whole wave of, regional content coming to the foray.
Cuckoo, Pratilipi, Stage, plenty of people, were, striving to serve the needs of Bharat per se from a content perspective. But even fundamental stuff, man. I mean, even on accessibility, services, and so on, right? I think language is so integral. So yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about this because see, the max number of languages you will put in is probably 7, 8, right? You'll have a Tamil, Telugu, and maybe Hindi or whatever. You have hundreds of dialects. Imagine being able to support all of those things. You're just reducing the friction for people to adopt internet and then be more productive and then, get educated and then start earning and then start delivering services and so on. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. So we have seen the success of UPI in India, right? And now NPCI is working with foreign entities to connect all the UPI platforms to systems in other countries to replicate this success abroad. Indians overseas remitted $87 billion just last year, which is the biggest inflow for any country which is tracked by the World Bank. And the successful overseas forays by NPCI would give India a homegrown alternative to SWIFT. They are in the process of connecting the UPI platforms to systems in other countries and is negotiating collaborations with governments, fintech companies, and service providers around the world. UPI's linkage with overseas nations will, anchor trade, travel, and remittance flows between the countries and also lower the costs of cross-border remittances. So, I mean, it's great to see that India is coming up with its own safeguards of, making sure that people have to move money around.
Yeah.
Right? Because what we have seen with the whole result of the Ukrainian-Russia conflict, Russia was literally cut off from international transactions.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, the government is thinking way ahead of its time to safeguard its interests. But really interesting to see how the geopolitics will play out over here.
Yeah, I think, before that, I think NPCI ounce for ounce is perhaps the most valuable institution that the government has constituted in the recent past. Simply phenomenal stuff. Kudos to the team. We have one of the largest diaspora in the world, right? I mean, and our folks are everywhere from the West to the Middle East to wherever else, right? And remittances are a very, very key use case. Sending money is not trivial. I mean, it's very difficult to do that, and there are charges and costs and regulation and all of those things. You've seen earlier, we had an agreement with the Singapore government, for example, to make LRS remittance schemes a little more simpler. And NPCI had also set up an international entity to sort of internationalize the UPI and to start working with regulators in 40-50 different countries to make this possible. With everything that's happened over the last 5 to 6 months, right, with the Russia-Ukraine war and with Russia being levied sanctions and being taken off the SWIFT network and everything, every country is sort of thinking about this, right? I mean, tomorrow what happens if something like this were to come upon them? And so I think India has taken a lead in establishing this, and by no means is this trivial, right? I mean, it's very difficult to do. But then, I mean, if you compare the fintech ecosystems anywhere in the world, I think India would easily rank as perhaps the number one, right? I've often, been on trips abroad, and I've wished that it was as easy to pay in all of these places as just scanning a QR code and just paying whatever it is to whichever merchant, right? But that's not the case. I mean, if you were to step into Starbucks in the US or whatever, you will be handed over like a handful of change which you have to lug around, right? I mean, it's very, very archaic. So yeah, long due. I think even Balaji Srinivasan has also spoken about internationalizing the India stack as such. He also talks about this India emerging as this non-aligned third power center in the world, right? Where others can congregate around. I think that's going to be economy led, that's going to be policy and tech led, I would say. And this is a very useful move in that regard.
Right. And also we look at, I mean, NPCI was also part of setting up the whole RuPay card network, right?
Yeah.
And I think RuPay has close to 64% market share in India.
Yeah.
Close to it.
RuPay is also another game changer, right? I mean, we don't have to be at the mercy of, Visa and MasterCard and the likes, right? And see, with India, anything that requires population level innovation and services, right, has to be done by the government. No two ways about it. At least it has to have the blessings of the government, right? I mean, we're talking about 1.4 billion people. By the time, Visa and MasterCard and whoever else services catch up, I mean, it's not going to happen, right? I mean, it's not going to happen in an equitable format either.
Right.
So, when you talk about financial inclusion and so on, I think UPI, RuPay has played a very, very, very important role.
Yeah. And this is all thought out from 2012, right? And it's just all part of one big plan. But talking about the various initiatives the government is taking, here we have Twitter that is suing the Indian government, seeking to quash some of the content removal orders issued to the social media firm, alleging abuse of power by the government. They are attempting to get a judicial review of some of these takedown orders, and a filing has been made in Karnataka's top court, arguing that some of the government orders fail to give notice to tweet authors. There are a lot of blogs which actually talk about how the Indian government is just trying to push its will on social media platforms that people are not able to share their views freely. And here we have Elon Musk trying to fight exactly that. So now really curious to understand, where do you think this will head to it?
See, freedom of speech is not absolute, right? I mean, obviously there are certain fundamental duties and responsibilities that every citizen has. And, I mean, this is du jour. I mean, literally every multinational entity abides by the policy and regulations of the land wherever they operate. And Twitter has this tendency of trying to act like a supranational entity, right? And they have multiple standards for multiple countries, right? I mean, you've seen the way they've acted in the West, for example, right? Where they've taken a policy position on certain things, and they've been more of an activist type, right? Adjudicating on the kind of content that is kosher and some stuff which is not. And so I think this is the case of, a few folks whose accounts have been banned for whatever they've said. Well, I mean, Twitter itself has banned many different accounts, most notably the former US President Donald Trump's account, right? So, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a lot of baloney in my perspective. And it's not just limited to India, right? They've done this elsewhere. I mean, Nigeria, for example, they've done similar things there as well. By the way, there were a lot of Elon pulls out jokes on Twitter, right? Because he's apparently pulling out of that $44 billion Twitter deal. I can't say I'm surprised. I think it was expected, and especially after the stock market tanked. But I think his point of contention is valid, right? Which is that, hey, what percentage of Twitter is bots, right? Is it 5% or 50%? He himself says that it's anywhere in the order of around 30%. Which is really, really significant, right? I mean, imagine I sold you like 100 oranges and figured that 30 of those were rotten. Obviously, at the very minimum, the price should vary, right? Which is what his contention is. But I think at this point of time, I mean, he has no intention to buy Twitter at all. So he has effectively pulled out. But it's interesting. I mean, there were a few legal arguments on either sides on who stands to win in a potential lawsuit and so on. We had Brett Taylor, who's the chairman of the board at Twitter, talk about the fact that, hey, I mean, this deal is going to happen one way or the other. And a few folks think that it's a little late for Elon to pull out after doing what he did or saying what he did. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it keeps the entire week entertaining. But having said that, folks, if you're
9 children.
And I don't know how
the man is solving the underpopulation crisis all by himself.
Well, folks, if you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well as like the video. That really helps us with content discovery. Okay, so moving on to the next part of this roundup, we have Axilor Ventures, who has recently announced the launch of its second fund, Axilor Technology Fund 2, with a total corpus of 770 crore or $100 million. They will continue to focus on enterprise SaaS, B2B commerce, agri-tech, consumer tech and health tech, with a renewed focus on the fintech sector. They will be writing a median check of 750k for companies with another option of 250k in bridge rounds. So Roshan, you had earlier pointed out that we won't see that much of a slowdown in early stage funding rounds, right? And here we have an early stage VC raising a new fund.
Yeah. No, Axilor is fantastic, right? I mean, they've been around for about 7 years, I think, right? And their fund one has done extremely well. So only about 18% of seed stage companies go on to raise follow-on funding of Series A. But Axilor claims that its portfolio, nearly 50% of them go on to raise Series A, right? Which is a fantastic validation for the kind of startups that they have in their portfolio as well. Yeah, they're very, very selective and also really help the entrepreneurs. And like I mentioned earlier, right? Early stage funding, early stage startup action is not going to slow down, right? Whether, irrespective of what the financial cycles are. And $100 million is significant, right? I mean, we'll probably see Axilor starting to invest in Series A's and so on. I mean, they already do a bunch of follow-ons anyway, but I think they will start perhaps writing Series A check sizes as well. And gives a lot more confidence to entrepreneurs as well at the seed, because they kind of know that, hey, I mean, Axilor can write that Series A check as well. Who knows? I mean, maybe sometime in the future, they might even raise an even larger fund to do, Series A, Series B and beyond as well. Yeah, fantastic team, a great set of startups that they have in their portfolio, and fairly secular as well in terms of the kind of startups that they invest in. If you look at Resha Mandi, for example, right? I mean, loosely you can call it agri-tech, but it's also B2B commerce, it's also financing, it's also platform and so on, right? I mean, very, very interesting, I would say. Yeah, great team and all the best for fund 2.
So I have one question here. Do you think there's an increased focus on profitability?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that seems to be the buzzword right now, and for good reason as well. I mean, all investors are asking their startups to look very closely at the finances. Look, at the early stage, I mean, they're going to look at what the business model is like, whether it is fundamentally sound, the unit economics kind of work out. And it's always good to have that focus on profitability right from the beginning. You always have to figure a plan to make sure that you turn over a dollar for, whatever it is that you spend. So, yeah.
So let's talk about cryptocurrencies a bit. Vault became the latest player in the cryptocurrency market to suspend all withdrawals, trading and deposits. The announcement came on July 4th, 2 weeks after they pruned its headcount by around 30%. Now, the present market conditions led to a substantial amount of customer withdrawals, which are in excess of $197.7 million since just June 12th, which saw the crypto prices nosediving. Following the withdrawals, Vault has frozen its operations, and the slump of the cryptocurrency market was sparked by the crash of Terraform Labs' USD stablecoin 3 Arrows Capital defaulting on loans and Celsius Network halting withdrawals. So all crypto players who suspended withdrawals by users stated that they have faced liquidity pressures. Now this is the point of concern for the entire crypto community.
Yeah, it is. And it just does a great disservice to crypto and Bitcoin and that entire movement itself, right? I mean, and it's also high time for regulation, I would say, right? I mean, some of these startups are based in Dubai or Singapore, but I think Indian retail investors need the government's help to sort of stay safe from this kind of schemes, right? I mean, Vault, for example, was promising a 12% interest in something they called a fixed deposits, right? And the scheme was that if you had about, I don't know, $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, you could sort of invest it in Vault, and Vault will use that money to lend to others and then use their crypto as some collateral or whatever, right? I mean, you can imagine what happens when that crypto asset falls by 40 or 50%, as really what happened, right? And crypto assets are volatile, right? I mean, this is not like, your land or, even cash, for example, right? I mean, it isn't like that.
It's a very new class of asset.
It's a very new asset, and, using that as collateral and then guaranteeing a 12% return, that's just absurd. That's really, really absurd, right? And it was doomed to fail from the beginning, I would say, right? And, this excess financialization of crypto, right? I mean, is something that I feel very uneasy about. At the one end, I mean, you have the mutual fund guys who can barely say mutual fund sahi hai. And then you have at the other end, folks who say beg, borrow and steal and invest in crypto and Bitcoin, or you get 12% returns. And the blame also lies with some of these Finfluencers, as they call them, right? I follow a few of these folks and some of the content is good, but I think calls for these folks to be really responsible also, because a lot of them just were shilling Vault and its fixed deposits and so on, including some of the better known people, right? And I think you're going to see regulation for sure, right? I mean, you're definitely going to see regulation, and with the crypto tax and everything, government has already made it sort of unviable to invest in crypto, right?
Yeah, I think crypto, since 1st of April when the law was passed, I think crypto prices in India has dropped by over 70%.
Yeah, and they probably, I mean, given the crash that happened afterwards, I mean, probably saved a bunch of people from losing their money as well. You can call it a coincidence, but it is what it is. I really feel that, the sooner we tune out of this price action and start to think of Bitcoin or crypto as a fundamental technology revolution, the better for us. Like if you're long crypto, if you're long Bitcoin, then be really, really, really long Bitcoin or crypto, right? See, we often compare it to gold as well. People don't buy and sell gold like how they buy and sell cryptocurrencies, right? I mean, and gold doesn't jump like 30% in a day or fall by 50% in a day and so on.
Imagine
right?
if that happened.
Oh, good God. So I think it calls for a little more character on all fronts. And I'm not absolving the kind of suckers who fall for this get rich schemes also, right? I mean, you just have to be a little more prudent. And with all of these platforms pushing such scandalous stuff, right? I mean, you can look at the thumbnails on YouTube. I mean, every thumbnail is bloody provocative, right? I mean, one after another. I mean, we've tried making some and failed miserably, right? But it's just excesses on all sides. It just calls for greater moral character to keep an even keel about things and to stay grounded, I think. But overall, I think it's really, really time the government clamps down on some of this stuff, right? Whether it's the new crypto companies or the Finfluencers and so on, right? I mean, I think it's necessary for the betterment of crypto, I feel, because again, crypto is an invention of the wheel magnitude innovation. It's a fundamental innovation and it's amazing, but let the use cases develop and don't stifle all of that with this nonsense of like trading and whatever else is happening, really.
I think the foundation needs to be way more stronger before we...
It's going to take time. See, gold has been in existence for thousands of years, right? And here is Bitcoin and crypto, which is basically about 10 plus years old, trying to compete with that and making those tall claims. I mean, some of those tall claims are necessary, right? How else will you get people's attention? But you also have to be tempered about your expectations for something like this. It's going to take time. Even as much as you say that innovation cycles are a lot smaller these days and things happen a lot more rapidly, I think you just have to give it time. And the greatest disservice is stuff like this, stuff that happens with Vauld, right? So it's really unfortunate, and I really hope that, better sense prevails.
Also in other news, Rajiv Mishra, who is the CEO of SB Investment Advisors that manages SoftBank Vision Fund, will step back from his executive role at the technology fund. He played a prominent role in raising the $100 billion Vision Fund, the largest pool of private capital which disrupted technology investing globally. And now he is likely to launch a new asset management platform as well, so stay tuned for updates on that. And also TCS achieves a new milestone of its workforce strength crossing the 6 lakhs mark. Now, Roshan, I'm sure you have TCS on your portfolio.
No, man. I mean, it's one of those stocks. I mean, I've been meaning to invest for a long time, but I just don't know when to enter, right? It has corrected and everything, but see, that aside, TCS, I think, India owes a debt of gratitude to TCS, Infi, Wipro and the likes, right? I mean, they've really created this nouveau middle class with all the aspirations and so on that we see. I mean, 6 lakh people directly employed, and, that again, if you look at the second order, third order effects of that, it's huge. So again, FC Kohli, Narayan Murthy, Azim Premji, all of those stalwarts, India owes them a great deal of gratitude.
Also, and from the startup community itself, I mean, I really did not know this, but Zerodha, which is the largest stockbroker in India, also called the Robin Hood of India, has only 33 people on their tech team.
Crazy.
Right? And the company is bootstrapped and did $140 million in profit last year, and bought back stock at a $2 billion value.
$140 million in profit, man. That
From
is
being a bootstrap
insane.
company.
Bootstrap to that, right? I mean, the numbers just boggle me actually, At 33, oh my God, it's just insane. I mean, this is just a model for every Series A or Series B startup that goes out and hires hundreds of engineers, right? To build their, whatever SaaS product or something. Phenomenal. I mean, the CTO is somewhat of a legend, right? And I've been meaning to check out a couple of podcasts where he has spoken about. But hey, I mean, we had Sidhu Ponappa of Gojek on the podcast way back when, a couple of years back, and he spoke about how to structure engineers in a way that all of them are adequately productive, and how it doesn't mean that more people equal to more output, right? And in fact, in tech, it can have the opposite effect a lot of times because people run into each other and so on. So if you're really interested to understand that, click on one of these links here. Definitely check it out. You will love it. But yeah, kudos on Zerodha. I think they're an ideal to emulate on so many different fronts.
Also, when someone talks about, what's the most future-ready startup in India, one of the names that comes to mind is Ultrahuman, right? We've had the founder on the podcast as well. And recently they announced what's called the Ultrahuman ring. Have you checked it out yet?
Yeah, a lot of buzz on Twitter for sure. Ultrahuman does an amazing job at branding for sure, right? And they have a fanatical community as well. So I've been meaning to get an Aura ring for a while. And I thought next time I travel to the US, I will. But now, I mean, this ultra human ring seems a little more lucrative, right? I'm going to check it out for sure. Measure my sleep and heart and whatnot, right? I mean, quantified self, here I come. No, but it really gives me a lot of pride to see that kind of product being produced in India, right? It's just something to behold. I mean, it's fantastic achievement, and kudos to Mohit and the team, and all the best for everything that you have coming up.
So Roshan, before we wrap up, any conversations lined up for this week?
So I had a fantastic chat with Anupreet Singh, who is the head of GTM at Six Sense India. So he was part of Slintel earlier. Slintel got acquired by Six Sense, and they've built a fantastic GTM team, right, comprising SDRs, AEs, growth and customer success and so on. And they've really perfected this, sell from India to the world motion, built a heck of a revenue engine. So we spoke about various aspects, how do you hire these folks, how do you enable them, and how do you basically scale this further. So it's kind of a masterclass on go-to-market, I would say. Definitely do check it out. In fact, I mean, there were so many things that I wanted to talk to him about. I'll probably do a follow-up as well. So yeah.
Awesome. So this will be an episode to keep an eye out for. So that's all for this week, folks. Do check us out on our social media platforms. It's at Operator Startup on Twitter and the Startup Operator on LinkedIn. And along with that, if you'd like to have regular startup related content delivered straight into your WhatsApp inbox, do subscribe to the WhatsApp link in the description below. Before we sign off, don't forget to like this video, subscribe and share this with your operator friends who you think might enjoy. And we'll be back with more action from the Indian startup ecosystem next week.
See you guys. Take care and have a great week.